there's two options that we're looking at. And one is staying in, forming that new party, but we run the risk of a Kamala Harris and Waltz presidency because we draw votes from Trump, or we draw somehow more votes from Trump, or we walk away right now and join forces with Donald Trump and we walk away from that and we explain to our base why we're making this decision.
That is RFK Jr.'s running mate, Nicole Shanahan, and they did it. That's what they did. They're ending their campaign and they're endorsing Trump.
Yeah, so look, I'm not surprised by this at all. I don't know why everybody's going around surprised.
What?
Really? Why? Why are you surprised?
Okay, continue. I'm gonna let you continue.
Because look,
he ran as a Democrat at first.
I know.
And then decided, okay, this isn't the path that's gonna help me win, so let me try doing it as an independent.
Yeah.
And maybe they've decided to endorse Trump because they're angry with the undemocratic behavior of the Democratic Party during the primaries and the fact that they fought tooth and nail to keep RFK Jr. off the ballots. But I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, so look, I think that Bobby Kennedy Jr. was a lifelong Democrat. And so that's why he started the Democratic Party, and it makes sense. And he's for, make sure fight climate change, and there's a bunch of things that like housing and anti-corruption that he's really good on, and progressive and Democratic. But his main issues are like vaccines and hating the elites, et cetera. And on a lot of those issues, he's much closer to Trump, right? And most of his voting base was Trump. It was about 60% Trump already, according to the polling. The Democrats always freak out. They're like, drive him out of the race. First of all, you drove him out of the primary. You could have ended it right there. Instead, you drove him into a third party race. It's a dumb decision. Now he's taking more votes away from Trump than before he dropped out. You still wanted to drive him out of the race because you hate competition. It's maddening. But given how much the Democrats have, hated him, mocked him, smeared him, and he agrees with Trump on like anti-elite. Again, Trump is not actually anti-elite, but he at least has voters in that direction. And the Democrats are viewed as the more elitist party. And given the vaccine thing is so huge for Bobby Kennedy Jr., and the Democrats will never, ever accept his point of view on that. So that's why it's not at all surprising that he goes to Trump.
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
Democrats drive me insane. Look, the elitist issue is a problem for Democrats. It is, and it's not some made up thing that Trump is throwing around. It's real. You can see it in the voter base, right? The voter base for the Democratic Party used to be working class Americans, without a college degree. And now those individuals have flocked over to the Republican side because the Democratic Party has become the party of the hyper educated, financially affluent party. Like that is what they represent. And that's a problem for them. It is. And I think that it informs some of the policies that we don't favor on the Democratic side, right? The handouts to corporations, the unwillingness to really fight for tax increases on corporations and the rich, like that kind of stuff, right? That's part of the reason why Kamala Harris, her proposal to raise taxes on corporations isn't to raise it back to what it was before Trump had cut the tax rate on corporations, which was 35%. She's decided to, go halfway and call for 28%.
Yeah, so look, this requires a quick history recap, right? So Democrats started as a party of labor. FDR actually gets things done for the average American, beloved 4 terms. JFK, LBJ continue that on the domestic front. But then the Democratic Party, and this is what I explain in Justice Coming, my book, starts to lose their way when corporate donations are now allowed by the Supreme Court in the late 1970s. Now, remember, the Republicans are always part of the big business, so they're taking in corporate money even when it was illegal. David Short has a really good podcast about this. So they continue to take money at this rate. The reason I'm telling you all this is that at some point among the professional management class, all the people that go to the Ivies and all that stuff, right? Almost all of them became like these technocrats, bureaucrats that went into the Democratic Party. Now, in the beginning, they used to go in the Democratic and Republican Party, and that's why they were corporate Republicans and corporate Democrats, and that's the way that it was for about 40 years straight. But then a new bunch of these PMCs, and Trump's not exactly in this category, he fits the category, but he's too dumb for the category. But PMCs like JD Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy decided, hey, you know what? It looks like the country's going in a populist direction. Let me get in on this scam. Now, the populism is not a scam. There's the right-wing voters are actually populist, progressive voters are actually populist, but these guys go, oh, there's an angle here. And so the con men then go do fake populism. And they're following in Donald Trump's footsteps of fake populism. Donald Trump went there. Yeah, he went to the good schools, but he didn't earn any of that. He's not really in this crowd, but he just is just an old school con man. He's like, oh, they like populism? I'll give them populism, and then I'll get all the money and the power and the fame, right? So, but that has created a Republican Party that at least rhetorically is playing towards populism, even if it's a con, right? Whereas the Democrats are like, no, we are the party of Pete Buttigieg, efficient bureaucrats who went to really good schools and will use really big words to tell you how it's your fault. And remember, all the money should go to the top and then trickle down to you. That used to be the Reagan Republicans. And so that's why we now have a situation where it looks like, when if you're and I think Bobby Kennedy Jr. is an actual populist, both on his both on his left-wing positions or right-wing positions. And you might not agree with some of those, and I don't agree with some of his positions. But I don't think he's a secret elitist who's trying to help the establishment. I think he was genuine that he was a populist. So he looks around and goes, well, we got more people going in the right-wing direction for populism, right or wrong. I guess that's where I belong, because these, Harvard bureaucrats that run the Democratic Party are never going to allow me to have my opinions on vaccines, et cetera. And they shouldn't, because I don't think they should allow him to have his opinions, but I think he's wrong about vaccines. But he knows that's not his home, and he's not wrong about that.
And look, he's also not wrong about the fact that, the Democratic Party did everything they could to exclude him from the democratic process. And I honestly think that that's a bigger reason for why they've decided to endorse Donald Trump. And by the way, Shanahan didn't hold back on that issue. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
Choice, this PAC, this DNC aligned PAC that was created specifically to take us out, has spent millions of dollars to take us out. They have unfortunately turned us into a spoiler. And we don't want to be a spoiler. We wanted to win. We wanted a fair shot. The DNC made that impossible for us. They have banned us, shadow banned us, kept us off stages, manipulated polls, used lawfare against us, sued us in every possible state. They've even planted insiders into our campaign to disrupt it and to create actual legal issues for us.
Now, look, someone watching that who isn't really in the know would be like, I don't know, that sounds kind of conspiratorial, but Cenk knows firsthand how much the Democratic establishment will fight to shut you out of being part of the democratic process in the primary. So what do you think about what she had to say there?
Oh, definitely. Look, both things can be true, which is that Bobby and Nicole Shanahan are a little conspiratorial. But in this case, they're probably right. Okay, so, and by the way, that's true for a couple of things that Bobby Kennedy says. He doesn't think Sirhan was a real factor in his father's death. And I think he's totally right about that. That might sound conspiratorial, but if you look at the facts, it is accurate, it is empirical. There are too many bullets in the wall, right? Among other things. So anyway, but to this, did the Democrats try to torpedo Bobby Kennedy Jr. in 18 different ways, including 12 different dirty ways? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if they had plans inside the campaign. I can't speak to that. I have no knowledge of that, right? But we saw them dig up stuff from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago. That's what they always do. They look for needles in a haystack. And then once they find a needle that you did something wrong in your life, they go, look at this. What a terrible person. This is the only, don't worry about the haystack. And to be fair to Bobby Kennedy Jr., the haystack in his case is his legal work in protecting the environment. And if he knew about that, he might take more Democratic votes away. So they don't want you to look at the haystack. But the vaccines are also part of the haystack. Keep it real, right? And so, but they found the needles about the brain worm and the dead bear, et cetera. And they made you think he's just such a crazy lunatic.
Eating a dog.
Yeah. And so some of it, he did things that were weird, right? And so there's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. At the same time, does that affect his policy? Some places yes, some places no. But bottom line here is, let me get to the part that nobody's telling you. When Nicole Shanahan says, hey, we wanted to be a real player here, but it looks like we're going to be spoilers and this is going to be impossible. Let me tell you why she says that and then the effect of it. She says that because after Biden dropped out, they lost a huge part of their base. A lot of their Democratic leaning voters went back to the Democrats, especially when Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz, which then made them winning near impossible. The main thing for RFK Jr. was Biden and Trump are unacceptable, so vote for me. And now when one of the candidates is acceptable, he loses all momentum.
Yeah, that's true.
Now that gets to the second part. Remember, Shanahan is financing this campaign. And so once she comes to the conclusion, we're not going to win, I'm not going to be vice president, we're not going to get these policies, does she want to continue to spend millions of dollars just to be a spoiler? And it looked like from that appearance, the answer was no. So if Nicole Shanahan doesn't want to spend any more money, they're out of money. So he has to make a deal. And final thing that leads to, that consequence is, let's not forget here that Bobby probably made a deal to get something from Trump. He was actively looking for a deal. He went to Trump, then he went to Kamala Harris, then back to Trump. Maybe he didn't get anything, but maybe he did. And for the people freaking out about that, that is the most normal thing in politics. Pete Buttigieg is not an expert on transportation. He got the cabinet position at the Department of Transportation because he bowed out to Biden before South Carolina and did him a political favor. That's how this thing works.
All right, well, final comment for me, I hate everybody.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.